The king says, you need to give up your titles. This is getting ridiculous.
Buckingham Palace has just been rocked by the most sordid embezzlement scandal in its history. Millions of pounds from a children's charity fund have suddenly vanished, secretly funneled into dark accounts on remote islands. At the core of this ruthless theft lies a horrifying piece of evidence: a blood-red USB drive containing explicit tapes of an underground criminal network from the past, now being used to blackmail the crown. Even more terrifying, the culprits aren't hiding on the outside. They are wearing evening gowns and sharing the banquet table right under the roof of Windsor. All suspicions of treason are converging on sisters Beatrice and Eugenie as they desperately struggle to cover up their family's black hole of sin. Determined not to let the throne be suffocated, Prince William and Princess Anne have quietly activated a deadly net. A cold-blooded hunt with lethal bait has been set right in the shadows to capture the traitors alive. Will Prince William reclaim the red USB before the dynasty collapses? When the trap springs and the thieves of noble blood are unmasked, how miserable will their fate be? And what humiliating punishment will crash down upon them amidst hundreds of eyes at the glamorous gala? Deep beneath the centuries-old oak floors of the Royal Lodge, fluorescent lights flickered incessantly, casting pale streaks across the damp wine cellar. The air was thick, reeking of must and the cold sweat of sheer terror. The clock struck exactly 2:30 in the morning. Beatrice slumped over the rough wooden table, her manicured hands now trembling so violently she could barely hit the keys of the unmarked laptop. Beside her, Eugenie bit her lip until it bled, her wild, wide eyes darting around the cellar's dark corners as if a pack of demons were waiting to tear them apart. They were backed into a corner, the nightmare from the sordid past of Andrew, the father they had always tried to protect, had returned to haunt them. A ruthless black market broker had delivered an ultimatum: £2 million in cash before dawn, or the most sickening videotapes of Andrew's debauchery with a criminal syndicate would be sent straight to the sun. The careers, the honor, and the rest of the York sisters' lives would be buried at the very bottom of society's filth. "Beatrice, hurry up! They just texted to rush us. If we don't transfer the money, it's all over," Eugenie hissed through gritted teeth, her voice shattering, her hands gripping the edges of her chair. Beatrice swallowed hard, her throat dry. She reached deep into the silk lining of her expensive handbag, her fingers brushing against a tiny object that felt as heavy as a mountain. She pulled it out, a dark red USB drive. The plastic surface of the drive seemed to burn, as if soaked in venom. It wasn't an ordinary storage device. It contained the complete anonymous access tokens to the charity fund for disabled children, of which the two sisters were patrons. It was blood money, the sweat and tears of millions of donors. And now, they were about to use that very money to buy a false sense of security for their family's rottenness. The war between a meager shred of conscience and the greed, the selfish desire to hold on to their wealth and glory, tore at Beatrice's soul. But the fear of losing their lavish vacations, of losing the halo of being princesses, defeated it all. "Just this once, we will find a way to quietly replace the money later," Beatrice lied to herself, her voice trembling with despair. She jammed the red USB into the computer's slot. The tiny LED light on the drive blinked rapidly, casting a grotesque glow on the sisters' pale faces. Lines of transaction commands zigzagged across the screen. Massive sums of money were being siphoned off, sliding out of the charity fund, branching into layers of shell companies before pouring directly into an anonymous black account. The royal blood was being drained. The most despicable betrayal had officially taken shape. But little did they know, they were not alone. Right above the cellar ceiling, through the gaps of a dust-covered iron ventilation grill, a pair of eyes as cold as an iceberg in the Arctic Ocean locked onto their every move. Prince William stood motionless in the darkness. Not a single heavy breath. Not a single sound. He was like a wild beast watching its prey dig its own grave. The anger within William didn't explode into shouts. It crystallized into a sharp, lethal, murderous intent. He saw the cowardice clearly on Eugenie's face. He stared fixedly at Beatrice's dirty hands as she executed the transfer. Charity money, money that should have gone to underprivileged children, was now flowing into the pockets of criminals to cover up the York's corruption. This treachery tore through the very last limits of the heir to the throne's tolerance. The enemy wasn't attacking with swords and spears from the outside. They were wearing evening gowns, laughing falsely every morning, and stabbing the dynasty in the back right in the shadows. William's hands clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. He quietly pulled out his phone and typed a single message sent to Princess Anne's highly encrypted number. "The rats have taken the bait. The red evidence. Prepare the trap." The war didn't break out with loud declarations. It smoldered, slithering like a venomous snake beneath the velvet carpets of the palace. William and Anne understood that to eradicate this cancer at its root, they couldn't alert the snake by beating the grass. They needed the red USB. It was the only piece of ironclad evidence directly connecting the York sisters to the laundered money and the blackmail network. The atmosphere at the Royal Lodge became suffocatingly tense. Afternoon tea parties turned into a brutal, psychological battlefield. William deliberately ignored Beatrice, shooting her piercing glares that sent chills down her spine. The terrifying silence of the Prince of Wales sent the York sisters into a panic. The feeling of tens of thousands of invisible eyes tracking their every move strangled their nerves. Fear turned into recklessness. The York faction decided to strike a dirty, preemptive blow. They wanted to sow doubt, creating a smokescreen to divert attention, preparing for the worst-case scenario. If the embezzlement was exposed, they would pin all the blame on William, framing him as the mastermind, draining the charity fund. One gloomy afternoon, Kate walked into her private office. Her gaze halted when she saw an anonymous brown envelope, cleverly hidden beneath a newly delivered basket of peonies. Sensing something amiss, Kate used a letter opener to gently flick the envelope's flap. Inside were 3 candid photographs. A man in a hooded jacket, his face hidden in the shadows, was handing a black leather briefcase to a man whose build and profile looked strikingly like William's in a deserted parking lot. Attached was a typed note in a crude font. "Your husband is the money launderer. Be careful before you lose everything." They were trying to smear him. They wanted to crush Kate's spirit, weakening the throne's strongest rearguard. Any other woman receiving this would panic, fall into a crisis, or question her husband. But Kate was not a fragile flower. Her eyes hardened, blazing with absolute contempt. She didn't panic. She grabbed the stack of photos and took long, decisive strides straight to William's office. She slammed the pictures down onto the oak desk right in front of her husband. Just one intersecting look between the two. No explanation needed. William instantly understood the York faction's vile scheme. His patience was depleted. The enemy had played the dirtiest game. They would retaliate with 10,000 times the ruthlessness. At the same time, in the isolated staff kitchen, Princess Anne had locked onto her target. Martha, Beatrice's closest maid, the one who took generous bribes to act as a courier and hide evidence. Dusk was falling. Martha stealthily stuffed a small parcel into her coat pocket, looking around nervously before pushing the back door to sneak out. But she had barely taken 3 steps when a cold figure blocked the narrow pathway. Princess Anne! Her back was ramrod straight, and her long-handled oak umbrella slammed into the cobblestone pathway with a dry, sharp thud. "Where do you think you're taking that trash, Martha?" Anne's voice was low, entirely devoid of emotion, yet it carried the weight of a boulder, crushing any resistance. Martha trembled, every drop of blood draining from her face. She stammered a denial, stumbling backward until her back hit the cold brick wall. Anne didn't call for the guards. She stepped forward, slowly but overwhelmingly. She raised the metal-tipped end of the umbrella, pressing it right into the hollow beneath the maid's Adam's apple, pinning her to the wall. The freezing metal dug into her flesh, cutting off Martha's airway. "Either you become my eyes and ears, taking this fake information back to report to your little mistress, or tomorrow morning, you and your entire family will be thrown out on the street, penniless, bearing the stain of stealing from the royals for the rest of your lives. Choose." Tears streamed down Martha's face as she nodded frantically in absolute terror. From that moment on, an invisible blade was held against the throats of the York sisters. Every filthy calculation of Beatrice and Eugenie fell perfectly under the control of the hunters. The deadly trap began to open. The blackmailers were growing impatient. The delay in the trickle of payments infuriated them. They demanded one final, face-to-face transaction. Hand over the rest of the massive sum of cash, and they would return the USB containing Andrew's original tape. The location was an abandoned warehouse deep in an East London industrial estate at midnight. Beatrice and Eugenie didn't dare show up themselves. They stuffed wads of cash into a black sports duffel bag, handing it to a trusted driver with a life-or-death directive. Bring the USB back at all costs. In the lavish living room of the Royal Lodge, the 2 sisters paced frantically like caged animals. They secretly gloated, convinced that once they got their hands on that original evidence, they would personally throw it into the fireplace. All their sins would turn to ash, and they would continue parading those fake photos to destroy William's reputation. But the power of the shadows never belongs to petty thieves. Right in the foul, dark alley behind the warehouse, Beatrice's driver had just completed the exchange. Clutching the small iron box containing the USB, he hurried toward the idling car waiting for him. Suddenly, from the thick shadows of the rusted shipping containers, 3 massive, dark figures lunged out. No badges, no appearance of being police. They moved with the speed and precision of killing machines. In less than 3 seconds, the driver was slammed face first into a filthy puddle. An arm as hard as steel locked around his neck, pinning him to the mud. Princess Anne stepped out from a black Bentley parked out of sight around the corner, her heels clicking sharply on the wet ground. She walked over, bent down, and snatched the iron box from the struggling henchman's hands. Anne opened the lid. The dark red USB lay neatly inside. The original evidence had been recovered. Without hesitation, Anne pulled another USB from her trench coat pocket. It was also red, identical in shape and weight to the original. But inside, it didn't contain a videotape. It contained a stealth malware, a Trojan horse designed by top-tier security experts. She tossed the fake USB into the mud right in front of the driver. "Take this trash back to your masters. If you breathe a word about tonight, you will never see the light of day again." Anne's voice was as sharp as a knife. The driver, terrified out of his wits, scrambled to grab the fake USB and crawled to his feet, running for his life. 2 hours later, at the Royal Lodge. Beatrice snatched the USB from the driver's hand, her eyes laced with the bloodshot veins of madness and supreme satisfaction. She threw her arms around Eugenie, sobbing with joy. "We won. It's all over. I'll plug it into the computer, wipe out all traces. After that, this throne will have to kneel before us," Beatrice screamed, her greed completely blinding her reason. She hurriedly opened the laptop and jammed the fake USB in. A cruel, twisted smile bloomed on her lips as she waited for the folder containing the tape to appear. But the moment the current ran through it, the LED light on the USB flashed violently. The laptop screen abruptly went pitch black. No folder appeared. The entire keyboard was completely disabled. The stealth malware had been activated. It didn't destroy the computer immediately. Like an invisible monster, it tore through every security firewall, extending electronic tentacles to suck out all the real data on Beatrice's hard drive. The money laundering transaction history, the emails negotiating with the blackmailers, and even the scripts for spreading fake rumors to smear William. Everything was drained and transmitted straight to the Prince of Wales's secure server in a fraction of a second. On Beatrice's blackened screen, a single, cold, razor-sharp line of white text appeared. "Thieves will always be thieves. See you at the gala." Beatrice froze. The blood in her veins turned to ice. Eugenie screamed in horror as the laptop suddenly hissed, acrid smoke pouring out, the hard drive completely incinerated by a built-in electromagnetic pulse. All the fake evidence they intended to use for framing had vanished into thin air, while their true crimes were now held firmly in the hands of their enemy. They had been herded into an iron cage with no way out. The annual Royal Gala at Buckingham Palace unfolded in suffocating splendor. Thousands of crystals on the massive chandeliers sparkled like tears of light. Hundreds of distinguished guests, aristocrats, politicians, and the most powerful billionaires donned their luxurious evening wear, chatting and laughing loudly over the melodic symphony music. Beatrice and Eugenie entered the grand hall. Their heavy makeup couldn't hide the absolute panic at the bottom of their eyes. Even though the laptop was in ashes, they still clung to one final illusion. William wouldn't dare make a scene, that for the sake of the dynasty's face, he would bury the incident and only punish them in silence. They forced themselves to raise their champagne glasses, plastering on stiff smiles, pretending they were still untouchable, noble royals. But they were wrong. The era of cover-ups was over. This cold-blooded game required the most brutal punishment to deter anyone eyeing the throne. William stepped up to the podium in the center of the banquet hall. He wore a crisp military uniform, his chest adorned with glittering medals. His presence radiated an oppressive authority that instantly plunged the massive hall into dead silence. The violins of the orchestra also ceased. Kate stood just below the podium, her emerald green evening gown clinging to her figure, her eyes cold and decisive, like a goddess of vengeance, staring straight at the York sisters. William did not smile. He swept his gaze across the crowd, and his eyes stopped, locking onto Beatrice's pale face. The temperature in the hall suddenly plummeted to freezing, chilling to the bone. "Tonight, we gather here to honor loyalty," William's voice rang out, resonant, authoritative, shattering the silence. But loyalty is not something to be bought and sold. And the honor of this family is not a commodity for the greedy to pawn in the shadows, trampling on the blood and tears of the most vulnerable. Beatrice took a step back, her hands trembling so much she spilled champagne onto the carpet. Eugenie dug her nails into her sister's arm, piercing the flesh. William raised his right hand high and flicked it down sharply. The massive chandeliers in the hall went dark. The giant projector screen behind him flashed with blinding light. Hundreds of eyes of the elite widened in absolute shock, fixed on the screen. Those weren't charity images. They were detailed bank statements tracing the money flow. Every glaring red number, every receiving account in the Caymans, the names of the shell companies, and Beatrice's digital signature were laid bare. At the same time, the banquet hall's surround sound system broadcasted a chillingly familiar voice. A voice extracted from the very data the malware had siphoned off. "Beatrice, hurry up! They just texted to rush us. If we don't transfer the money, it's all over." Eugenie's panicked hiss echoed, bouncing off the gilded walls, striking the eardrums of all the guests. The auditorium was dead silent. A few gasps of horror could be heard. Many duchesses covered their mouths with their hands, unable to believe the disgrace unfolding before them. "Just this once. We will find a way to quietly replace the money later." Beatrice's voice played, clear, distinct, carrying all the vileness of someone stealing donations meant for disabled children. Beatrice's mouth hung open, her face plastered with makeup, now as white as a corpse. She gasped for air, clutching her chest. Eugenie collapsed onto the velvet-carpeted floor, holding her head, sobbing hysterically. The haughty facade, the noble title of princess, was completely shattered, revealing their cheap, hollow, and utterly greedy souls. The chandeliers blazed back to life, glaring and mercilessly illuminating the two traitors. William stepped down from the podium, his steps slow but carrying the force of a sweeping hurricane. He stopped in front of the York sisters. The surrounding crowd automatically parted, creating a circle of judgment from which there was no escape. Kate walked up beside her husband. From her diamond-studded clutch, she slowly pulled out the real, blood-red USB. The ultimate piece of evidence deciding the political lives of the Yorks. No vulgar shouting, no unnecessary explanations. Kate coldly flicked her wrist, throwing the USB straight down onto the marble floor, right at the tip of Beatrice's shoes. The clatter of hard plastic echoed dry and sharp, cutting through Eugenie's sobbing. "Pick up your filth," Kate said, her voice not loud, but powerful enough to pierce the eardrums and slash away the last remnants of her opponent's dignity. Beatrice looked up at William with tear-filled eyes, a pitifully pleading gaze, her trembling lips clinging to a shred of family ties. "William, please, we are family." Family does not steal from disabled children. Family does not set traps to smear each other in the dark. William replied coldly, his eyes devoid of a single ounce of pity, without any compromise. "The front door is no longer for you." He turned his back, giving a slight nod to the captain of the Royal Guard standing at attention in the corner of the room. Without hesitation, 4 towering guardsmen in black uniforms marched forward. They didn't hold back, didn't act with the deference of servants. 2 officers roughly grabbed Beatrice's arms, squeezing until they bruised, hauling her to her feet. The other 2 dragged Eugenie away, letting her designer dress sweep across the dusty floor. Before the eyes of hundreds of aristocrats, the glittering royal insignia pinned to the sisters' evening gowns were ruthlessly torn off by the officers, tossed aside on the red carpet like broken toys. The York sisters were dragged out of the magnificent grand hall through the narrow, dark passageway meant for servants. Their desperate screams were shut out by the heavy oak doors slamming shut, locking them entirely into oblivion. There would be no press release to cover this up. There would be no closed-door meetings to negotiate a truce. They were stripped of all their titles, thrown out of the doors of power, stepping empty-handed into an eternal darkness, with no way back. The ultimate punishment had fallen. The ruthless justice of the throne had been executed using the blood and tears of the traitors themselves. Prince William has just proven he is a resolute protector of the crown, placing the interests of the people above blind blood ties. How brilliantly and solidly do you think the future of the British monarchy will step into a new era under this strong, transparent, and rational leadership? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.